welcome back Janine Truitt. She is the purveyor of all things HR, including technology. How are you, Janine?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and her site is talentthinkinnovations.com. Did I get that right, Janine?
I want to burst with rainbows and unicorns because you finally got it right. So
I
thank
got it
you.
right the last show, so
The
don't.
last show, better late than never, right?
Right. So, that's twice. So you can leave me alone now. Uh,
I'll stop calling you C now.
yeah, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Young women. Uh, Chris Fields is also back on the show, resumecrusade.net. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Doing good. Thanks for having me back.
Great. And just a reminder for the come and sign up for the free e-guide that I have on thevoiceofjobseekers.com. Just look for the tab that says get the free e-guide. It's 118 job search tips for the modern job seekers in 2018. That has been an overwhelming response. We've had nearly 2,000 signups. It's not quite 2,000, but it's like really close. And those are the ones that not including the duplicate signups that I've had at times, but definitely want you to come and get some for your job search. And speaking of job search, I've asked both of my guests, and I'll throw in my 2 cents as well, to provide 3 job search tips for 2018, something that's going to be useful, something that will be practical, and something that will help you get hired. And so I'm going to go with Chris first. Three
Oh,
job tips that you'd like to offer the peoples for 2018.
I want. Okay, so basically, be clear about what you want. I've been dealing with a lot of clients who I've had to help gain clarity
Mm-hmm.
on what they really want to do and who they really want to work for. And I think that if you are clear in where you want to work and who you want to work for and the things you want to do, it will relieve so much stress, so much strain, so much of the just the problems with searching. Focus on that. That's one. Number two, look at your resume and make sure that it's saying the things that you want to say, not just a collection of duties, not just a bunch of random bullet points, but make sure it has a narrative of where you're trying to take your career, and your cover letter as well. And I have to say, the third tip is do not just rely on LinkedIn or the job boards. I think now, I hate to say it, so it sounds so cliche-ish. Now more than ever, you have to get out and meet people, because I'm seeing that a lot of people are hiring stands the resume. They're like, the resume is a bonus, but not the thing. If they meet you and they get a good feeling about you, they're willing to take a chance on you. And so you have to get out. You have to go to where the people are going. I think most cities have bubbling and bustling communities of new talent, and you just have to go out there and you have to, you know, make yourself part of that community.
Good tips. I definitely love the clarity part. And that's actually the first job tip when people ask me, do you have anything really quick? That's the first thing I say. What do you want to do and where you want to go? Pretty much. That wraps it up, doesn't it?
It really helps because if you don't know the types of things you want to do or the types of company you want to work for, then what you end up doing is applying to everything. And what people don't realize is that sometimes that comes through when you apply. Like the person who's reading it can tell that you don't know what they do or what their company is about. Quick story, real quick. Doing some local work here, working a little more on some initiatives, and the guy I work with has turned over some HR things to me, and we're recruiting right now for a recruiting coordinator. And
Mm-hmm.
I got a couple of emails, and it was very interesting. I could tell by the emails that the person had not read the job description and did not know much about the company. They just saw the tweet or the social share that says we're hiring and where to send your resumes, but they didn't read the part where it says, read the job description and the things you must have. And I'll say that because it's a part-time position, and on a couple of resumes I got in the objective statement, which we all hate, right? The
Mm-hmm.
very first
Yep.
line in both of these resumes say, "I'm seeking a full-time position."
That's it.
That's
That's
it.
it. It shouldn't laugh because there's so many people who still have that objective out there. That's the first thing it says, and it's about them instead of being about the company. So that's why it makes the objective statement so outdated.
And basically, like I said, this is a part-time position. It says everywhere it's part-time. If the first line of your objective statement is saying I'm seeking a full-time position, well, a lot of people will just say that's it for you right there.
Yeah.
That's it. You're not listening.
Yeah.
You're not paying attention. So make sure you know what you're doing and where you're going.
Yeah. Pretty
Be clear.
much. Pretty much. Janine, did you have any comments on Chris's
I love the
tips?
clarity piece,
Yeah.
because I've been dipping my toe a little bit more back into the recruitment realm through my business, through a client that I just took on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's required, the nature of the work has required me to look at people's resumes and what they're applying for, because ultimately I'm helping them build a technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm just kind of mortified and annoyed by the sheer amount of people that are just haphazardly applying to things. So that said, my first tip is pay attention to what you are applying for and where you are applying to.
Mm-hmm.
So to just give you like an example, we're dealing a lot in healthcare. And so, some of the positions are they're pretty particular. Like you can't really qualify out of thin air is what I'm saying. So, in a case of like a hospitalist, which is typically an internal medicine or a family medicine doctor who rounds at a hospital, not in a practice.
Mm-hmm.
I will get resumes from people who are actuaries. I get resumes from people who are coders. I get resumes from people who are in HR. Why?
Because they're probably not paying attention.
Well, yeah, either you're not paying attention or you legitimately think that you hold some sort of skill set that trumps what we're actually asking you for. In this case, you would need to have a medical degree, whether it's an MD or DO. You also need to have a board certification in internal medicine. And so last I checked, that's just not really a skill set for HR people, nor is it for a salesperson. So I see it there, and I see it across a lot of disciplines. And I like taking the HR hat off, I tend to think that it's maybe coming from a place of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also coming from a place of no focus, which goes back to what Chris was saying, being clear on exactly what your value add is, what you do, what is the nature of the work that you do and the skills that you have, and going after the jobs that align with that, which brings me to my second tip, which is try to align your interests and passions with the work that you do or that you aspire to obtain. So I think that we've spoken enough now about like how people need to do meaningful work, and we've kind of drilled that to no end. But what does that really mean? It really means that people need to stop just doing a job because it pays the bills, and they need to get closer to trying to align their work with the things that they actually like doing and they're actually good at. So I think that needs to be a theme for 2018. My third tip is kind of off the cuff, but hopefully you guys will get where I'm coming from. And it's don't neglect your mental health. So one of the other things that I've seen over the course of this year in specific is just people really, really, really struggling with mental health issues. Not the ones that you or I usually think of, the more pronounced things like schizophrenia or bipolar or anything like that, just depression or seasonal depression or whatever it is. And I think that it's a discussion that we need to have more in the career and HR space, because I don't think we always take into consideration what employees carry or what candidates carry when they come to us. And I think for the job seeker, they have to understand that you're only as viable and as valuable as how physically and mentally fit you are. So that is to say that if you're not in the right state of mind or you're not physically well, it's not exactly going to help you get that next opportunity. It just, and especially when we think about, and when I know that like part of where we're going from a technology perspective in AI is biometrics,
Hmm.
where, companies are going to be looking at how physically fit you are in terms of whether or not that makes you viable for a job. That is a discussion going on. I just think for people's own sake and also for what's coming down the pike, there has to be a much more diligent focus on mental health and how people are showing up to work from a wellness perspective.
I think that's excellent. The third point, if I could, this is not part of my job tip, but I will add even to really for people to consider their, and I'm not going to assume that there are a lot of people or that there are a few people, but I know the people out there who have learning disabilities that they don't consider when they consider their future careers or
Mhm.
even their current careers. I don't know how many people they reach a ceiling quickly because they're they have undiagnosed learning disabilities. And I've had a few of those inquiries this past year where somebody will say, I'm trying to get into this field, but I have a learning disability. And they've gone through master's programs, formal education settings, and done well. But when you work in the working world, it's a little bit different because of the stress and sometimes strife of the request, which requires you sometimes to think outside the box. So if you have somebody who has OCD or HDHD, where they sometimes need to have more of a controlled working environment, to the point to where they need to learn and have their output of work be much more controlled to the way they learn, it causes a problem. I don't know how that's going to expand to a larger discussion just yet, but I really think people really need to take stock. If you have those kind of disabilities or those challenges, they need to be addressed as opposed to just assume that it'll be okay if you walk in with those to an employer and thinking that, under stress, that if you haven't performed in the past, you're not going to perform just now, just by accident. There's got to be some strategy and things like that to be implemented. But I definitely get the mental part of it too, which I think is the bigger part of your discussion. Is people don't consider their mental capacity even. If you're not good at memorization, if you're not good, or that it's hard for you to function under certain types of challenges at work, you need to consider that and address it.
Agreed. No, and I think what you say is so true. It's actually it is a wide conversation. I've been kind of in the realm of having those discussions with people who are kind of pioneering that
Hmm.
um, for 2018 and beyond. And I think part of the sentiment during National Disability Month, which was in October, was that like differently able, disabled has been pretty much a forgotten demographic of the workforce. And so, we kind of treat it as a piecemeal item, but we
Yeah.
don't really develop strategy around it.
Hmm.
And so it was nice to hear from companies like JP Morgan Chase, who, from all intents and purposes, we usually regard as a big giant and wouldn't exactly think they'd be ahead of the curve in that way, but they are, working towards normalizing what it means to be, differently abled. And part of what I've kind of come to is like we're all differently abled. Like if you really think about it, I mean,
True.
we all come, meaning that
True.
we
Yeah.
all come to our jobs with different ways of doing things, thinking, synthesizing things. And so it calls into question, why do we single out people who are either visibly or not disabled by saying, oh, well, they're different. And so we've got to treat them differently. So I do think it's a bigger conversation. It is something that I'll be talking about a whole lot more in 2018. So love where you went with that.
Yeah, I'm going to follow that. I've had I've had a couple of shows regarding disability, and one of the young men, he's differently able, but he does a lot. He's made it into a business. He goes into businesses and talks about how to help people who are disabled, differently abled, etc. His name is Dylan Rafferty. If you want to look him up, Janine,
Yep.
he's on my Facebook. He's on my Facebook contacts as well as everywhere else. Like him a whole bunch. And he does a lot of different components, but one of the places where he pointed me to was Bank of America. And when you look at Bank of America, they'll show you all the different things that they've been doing for the past few years in helping and hiring people who are disabled and differently abled. Definitely I'll be making my round back to that again and presenting a show or two in the next few months.
I just
Yeah.
want to say this about that topic.
Uh huh.
You guys know I live here in Memphis. We have the University of Memphis Tigers, and we had our most successful football season ever this year. We just played in the Championship Bowl, and we played against UFC or UCF. I'm sorry,
Right. A shootout.
University of Central Florida in Orlando, and it was nationally televised. So I'm watching the game, and there was this kid on defense, and I forget his last name, but I think his first name was Shaquem or Shaquille, something like that. This guy had one arm, but one hand, one hand. I'm sorry, not one arm, but one hand. So he did not have a left hand. And when I first saw him out there, I was like, wait, I thought maybe something was wrong with my television, to be honest with you. My point is, he was killing us on defense, sacking the quarterback, smacking balls out the way, tackling. And I'm like, and they were talking about how he's going to get drafted probably third, fourth round, but
Hmm.
he's going to get drafted. And as much as he was killing my team, because if I'm not rooting for Ohio State, my alma mater, I'm rooting for the Tigers.
Hmm.
I was still, impressed. Like, we're getting beat right now by this guy who is differently able. So I think the interesting thing about his story is you can really do anything if you put your mind to it, and then if you have someone who's willing to believe in you. So I think the conversations about disabilities, be they physical or mental, are very important because there's a huge workforce of people who are willing to work if they're just given a chance. And let's be honest, there's a lot of work that goes on in this world that we live in that a lot of people can do who don't have to have, you know, 4-year college degrees, especially when you talk about these fulfillment centers and distribution centers and things like that. So I think it's an important topic, and I look forward to hearing you guys' thoughts on that as we get into the new year.
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
I did. Go
before
ahead.
we move on really quick, I just wanted to add in, since you put that was great, Chris. People who are differently abled are their unemployment or underemployment rate is far higher than any other
Yes.
demographic. So
Yes.
I just wanted to throw that out there so people understand, like, when as a Black person, we can talk about like how our unemployment rates are higher than the norm, and we can go across all the demographics, but they suffer more than any of us put together.
Yeah, I completely agree. Not only that, but there's also the fact that we don't talk about enough how, and I think you touched on a little bit about how there are disabilities that are unseen or not
Hmm.
obvious,
Yep.
where people who can function very well mentally, that that they've gone on to be lawyers and even doctors, but they have those times when there are some challenges. Um, I think there's a larger discussion that I've read about especially when I was in school, when I was doing my master's. Um, it's just so much to even cover that we can't even cover right now that we had
Okay.
enslaved for. So I need to give my three. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so really, when we talk about stealth job searches, we're talking about job search on the low. We're talking about doing it so that your employer does not know that you're looking for a job. And there's a lot of obvious stuff that's out there. Not dressing, not coming dressing abnormally formal for an interview where your place of work is usually casual. That would be a sign. Or using, printing anything out at work, leaves a trail. Anything that leaves a trail to possibly you're looking for a job at your place of employment could endanger your current employment. But yet, there's some tools that are right there before you many times is your smartphone. Your smartphone should be it could be a part of your stealth search strategy. People don't realize that they can do almost anything that your laptop can do. You can fax from it. You can sign for documents if you're like working on a contract on the side and you're hoping using that contract to lead to full-time employment. You can email from your smartphone. You can file applications. You could do company assessments on the phone. Most of them, I shouldn't say most of them, but a lot of companies provide a mobile version of whatever assessment they have because a lot of times before you even walk in an interview, you've taken an assessment, you've done a phone interview. So you've already had two touches right there in front of you before you walk into an interview, before you touch base with a real live person. So as part of your stealth, as far as the things you could read about LinkedIn and things like that, your phone could really help, especially when there are things that are timely that you can't wait to get home to respond to. It's good if you can. It's better if you can, but if you can't, consider becoming a little bit more savvier with your mobile phone as far as not only just in applying for jobs, but also your career development. Most of the Udemy and Skillshare, they have mobile versions of their courses. So you can use that to your advantage, of course, during your own time, of course. So I don't want to, take away that part of it. The second part, I'm going to kind of scurvy because Chris took my first point as far as clarity. I think that's a real big
You're
one.
welcome.
Yeah, sure. Uh, is kind of going back to a discussion that we've had is that college degrees are no longer the first logical and viable option to advance your career. It's important to add more breadth to your future career considerations. But before investing in a college degree, it's time for you to really take stock of your research and how you research. And instead of looking at what course you can take, try to follow a model of a person. And you have LinkedIn to use and in many other ways to find people who are doing what you're doing that they may not have had to have a college degree now. And that's not to say that you may not have to go back and get some skills. But the college degree is no longer the first thing to think of. There might be some loftier goals you might have that may require that college degree or the MBA, and that's fine if there are people who have that model and have that idea, and you can follow that track a little bit easier. But there's so many other careers that people do. I think there's so many people for many years now who got college degrees, but their first job didn't require a college degree. Their first job just required a high school diploma or an associate's. Now, the company may even say college is preferred, but that doesn't mean that college is the absolute thing that you have to have. So that would be my second tip: is you consider your educational options. Thirdly, I think one of the things that we tend to do as well is we think that we're on our own when we're searching for a job, when your network is really almost anybody that you meet and that you put in that network. So to find small groups of like-minded professionals are pretty beneficial when there are people who are at different stages of their career. So this is a good chance to exchange value. When you get in a small group, you can find small groups anywhere, even if they're online. It's great, but if you can find them offline, it's even better. So, consider it like a career partnership where you're kind of how you would work out together, that you can push each other in a very positive way, that people are like minded, that they have the same goals. They don't necessarily have to have the same exact career that you're after, but I definitely think that that would be a very powerful tool for you to use for
Hey,
your career.
hey, Mark.
Yo.
Hey, Mark. I'm gonna let you finish. I'm gonna let you finish, but I gotta say this.
No, Kanye.
Yeah, yeah, right. I'm gonna let you.
So one, you talk about people who may need to um, get information and people want to know about it. That's a very good point. So here's my response to that. If you work in a place where you need like your performance evaluation to get another job, or you need some type of document where you have to go and ask somebody, and like you were talking about printing off stuff, things like that, I suggest you do it every few months anyway, just to throw people off. I'm thinking about a person who I worked with recently who they have what they call career jackets, and the manager keeps them.
Hmm.
And so he wanted to apply for another job, and he needed his career jacket. So when he went to him, of course, oh, you thinking about leaving? What's going on? And all this, and he didn't want to deal with that. So if you're in a situation like that where you need to get some information uh, or keep your information fresh, ask for it every couple of months, just anyway. That way
Hmm.
they never know. And the same thing goes for clothing. If you normally dress down and then you got an interview and you wear a suit or you dress up, everybody's going to ask you, oh, what's going on with you? So just start throwing them off. Dress nicely occasionally for no apparent reason that they know about. And then that way they become kind of, desensitized to it. And then
Hmm.
the last thing I will say is the point about degrees. I really am starting to see a backlash of sorts when it comes to degrees. If
Hmm.
you got too many, it works against you, and especially if you're applying for things that don't require more than one degree. So be careful about getting degrees just to say you have degrees, unless that's what you want to do and you want to take that debt. But don't think that if you get 3 or 4 degrees that obviously you can do any job and everybody should hire you. That's not the way it's going down. And also, I'm working with this company here, um, where we target children,
Hmm.
kids in the community. But we are developing an adult program for 2018 that offers a 6 month, we call it a boot camp, career boot camp, and you get a industry recognized certification. And when you come out, you can get a entry level software engineering job or development job,
Hmm.
making anywhere from $50,000 to $60,000 off the rip.
Mm.
Now here, that's a lot of money, and
Sure it is.
you know, there's a couple of kids who have decided to like, and we're not the first. Like, there's programs already happening like that in Nashville, Miami, and California. It's other places too, I'm sure, but those are the ones I know about for sure. And there are people who have already done it. And one young man I know who relocated from Memphis to Nashville to go to their program, and his family wasn't too happy about it because he had got lots of college offers, but he decided that coding was something he wanted to do. And so I told him, I said, look, you'll turn those naysayers into supporters as soon as you finish this boot camp and you get your first job making a good living. Then you go and get another one. And I said, you know what? Colleges will always be around. So those are excellent points you made. And I just wanted to kind of piggyback off those points of, you know, keeping your career profile together, dressing the part, and then also the degree situation that you talked about.
Good deal.
Oh, I want to chime in on the degree stuff as well. I think a lot of what I'm seeing in terms of the education space is this mantra of self-directed learning. So that is to say, if you want to take up a certification program, do that. If there's a course at a college and you want to take that course, do that. But it's almost like this piecemealing together of education that is not as linear as what like all of us kind of went through.
Hmm.
You go through primary school, high school, college, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think in specific, the Gen Z generation, which is anybody, I think, born 1995 and beyond,
Hmm.
really embraces this concept, largely because they're the generation of the recession and they totally don't see the direct correlation between going to a university or college and success. And plus, they are also largely much more entrepreneurial than what people even said of the millennials. So I really think, I don't think necessarily that colleges and universities are going away just yet, but I do think that the time is upon them to rethink how they're doing it. And I think we'll probably see that shift happening at that level. And I'm certainly trying to champion that shift even too from an internal training and development standpoint, because even that, much like the colleges and universities, hasn't changed in over 30 years. It's very static. And it doesn't really speak to how people are learning and engaging with information now. So I just wanted to share that.
No, that was good stuff. That's good stuff. So there you
What
have
we
it.
got next on the docket, sir?
Well, yeah, some of you listening, you would have to be in the pre-discussion to kind of get that portion of it. But anyway, be good again. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us here on the Voice of Job Seekers. If you want to know more about the Voice of Job Seekers, go to voiceofjobseekers.com, and you can read the articles and listen to the podcast and watch some of the videos that are there already. You can also go to iTunes, download, tell me what you think about the show. Honest opinion. I'm not going to say I want a 5-star rating. I don't have to have that. But I would like to know your thoughts. Does this meet your need? Does this hopefully, or do you want to have a deeper discussion about it? Let's talk about it.